Hello everyone, Dr.Mungli here. So this video is all about dietary fuels. As the name says, dietary fuels, that is the fuels, the type of fuels that we take in our diet and what will happen to those fuels in our body. So let's jump to that. So at the end of this video, so you should be able to learn what are our major dietary fuels and how these dietary fuels are oxidized in our body, how our cells generate energy, and for what purpose our cells will generate energy, or for what purpose this energy is used. So these are the learning objectives for this short video here. So now, what are the major dietary fuels that we have? So the energy production is coming from the major dietary fuels. So the dietary fuels, I'm going to write that here. So we have carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is one of the major dietary fuel that we have, carbohydrates, and then we have fats, and the third dietary fuel is proteins. So major dietary fuels that we have in our food are carbohydrates, we have fats, and we have proteins. Now, what will happen to carbohydrates, fats, and proteins? So generally these major fuels, they will undergo oxidation. So there is an oxidation of all these molecules. So major dietary fuels, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats will undergo oxidation, and when these molecules will undergo oxidation, so there will be a release of energy. So the oxidation of these molecules will release energy, and that energy is in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And also not only oxidation of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats will release energy in the form of ATP, so they will also release energy in the form of heat. So heat is also part of oxidation of dietary fuels, and as a byproduct of this oxidation, so there will be release of carbon dioxide molecule. Okay, so this is what happens to oxidation of our dietary fuels, carbohydrates, fats, and protein. Now, how which process in our body will use this ATP? So what will happen to the ATP that is generated in the oxidation of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins? So the energy that is generated in the oxidation of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats will be used for certain biosynthetic reactions or the anabolic reactions. I'm going to come to that point. So the energy utilization reaction. So basically the energy that is synthesized by the oxidation of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids will be used in energy utilization reaction. So I'll just write it as energy utilization here. So what kind of reactions uses this energy? So any reaction that is a biosynthetic reaction. So biosynthetic reaction. So let me give you an example for biosynthetic reaction. It is like fatty acid synthesis. If a new fatty acid has to be synthesized in our body, or a cholesterol synthesis, or like nucleic acid synthesis, DNA and RNA. So this kind of new molecule synthesis that needs energy. Now other than that, energy can be, this ATP can be used for like muscle contraction. So whenever we do exercise, or like heart when it is heart contraction, so any muscle contraction uses ATP there. Now the third use of energy like ATP is like detoxification, like throwing external molecules out of our body. So the chemicals or any coloring agent or anything which has to be thrown out of our body need to be they need ATPs. So that's another energy utilization reaction. And then ATPs can be used in any active transport process, active pumps or active transporters, active transport across the membrane. So it uses energy there. So these are all the energy utilization reactions. So what happens during this process? So the ATP that is produced in the oxidation of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids will be used here, and they will release ADP. So there will be release of adenosine diphosphate from adenosine triphosphate, and also the phosphate, terminal phosphate, it breaks and release as inorganic phosphate. So now this ADP and PI, it's a broken down product of, it's an oxidation product of ATP. Basically ATP is terminal phosphate is broken down and releasing energy, and that energy is used for biosynthetic reactions. Now this ADP and PI need to get back into ATP form, and that means they enter into electron transport chain and reconverted into ATP, and for that you need to oxidize carbohydrates, proteins and fats, and for electron transport chain to phosphorylate ADP with PI to make ATP. So it needs oxygen molecule. So there is a need for oxygen during that time, and that's, I'll write it as like oxygen is entering into this reaction. So this is how reactions are used here, like oxidation reactions. So let me separate it out. This is an oxidation of carbohydrates, proteins and lipids. So the oxidation reaction will be coupled with biosynthetic reactions or other reactions that are utilizing the energy. So in order to put this into like common terminology, so we are going to refer these molecules as this process here. Oxidation of dietary fuels is referred as catabolic reactions. These are all catabolic pathways. So catabolic pathways are basically, these are oxidation pathways, and by oxidizing or by breaking a molecule, there will be release of energy in the form of ATP and heat. Now this ATP is used to make anabolic reactions possible. So anabolic pathways. So anabolic pathways are the ones that will synthesize a new molecule. So this is how two pathways are connected here. So always remember, so catabolic pathways, so these catabolic pathways are oxidation of carbohydrates, fats and proteins, are always linked with the anabolic pathways, which are biosynthetic pathways, or anywhere where there is biosynthetic pathways or the anabolic pathways. So other than that, like muscle contraction, detoxification, active transport also utilizes energy. So this is in brief or overview of how our dietary fuels are used. Now let me take you a little more into details how exactly our catabolic pathways are producing energy in the form of ATP. So as I already shown you, like carbohydrates, one of the major dietary fuel that we have, carbohydrates. Let me write all those major dietary fuels. So we have carbohydrates, we have fats and we have proteins. So all these carbohydrates, fats and proteins, so they need to undergo a digestion process into their simpler form. So that happens in our intestine. So carbohydrates are broken down into glucose, that's a major monosaccharide. Fats are broken down into fatty acids, and proteins are broken down. Now the proteins are digested into amino acids. So amino acids are the digested product of proteins. So what will happen to all these simple molecules? So whether it is a glucose, fatty acid or amino acid, so when they they need to undergo oxidation. So they all will undergo oxidation. So glucose will undergo oxidation, fatty acid will undergo oxidation, and amino acids will undergo oxidation, just in case if there is a need for energy or something. So the oxidation of glucose, fatty acids and amino acids will give rise to a common metabolic intermediate called acetyl CoA. So acetyl CoA is a final common metabolic intermediate, and during this oxidation process, whenever glucose is oxidized into acetyl CoA, there will be release of energy in the form of so basically the electrons are here released, and these electrons, whether it is an oxidation of glucose into acetyl CoA or oxidation of fatty acids into acetyl CoA or oxidation of amino acids into acetyl CoA. So the electrons are released here. So electrons are generally released in the form of NADH or FADH. So these are the things like NADH, it will be there in the form of NADH plus H plus, or it will be there in the form of FADH, FADH2 molecule, FADH2. So NADH or FADH, these are the molecules that will carry those electrons. So these NADH plus H plus or FADH2, they can enter into electron transport chain to generate energy or ATP. I am going to explain that little later. So apart from releasing electrons, because it's an oxidation, so loss of electron is going on. So there is during this process there is also can be released of heat. So energy, not all energy is getting into NADH plus H plus. Some of the energy can be released as heat. So whenever metabolic reactions are going on, so there will be release of some heat, and that particular heat can maintain our body temperature. I am going to come to that point again. So overall, there is an oxidation going on here, and that oxidation as you all know, it's a loss of electrons. So electrons are given out when a molecule is converted, and all these dietary fuels, simpler form of dietary fuels are converted into acetyl CoA. Now what will happen to acetyl CoA? So acetyl CoA will enter into Tca cycle. Acetyl CoA is for energy purpose, so it gets into Tca cycle. So Tca cycle has got several reactions. So around 8 reactions are in Tca cycle, and in this particular Tca cycle, it's an oxidation of acetyl CoA. Further oxidation of acetyl CoA is going on here. So acetyl CoA, as you might be knowing, it has got 2 carbons. Acetyl CoA is a 2 carbon molecule, and these 2 carbons present in acetyl CoA will be released as carbon dioxide. So the carbons present in acetyl CoA are oxidized, and they will be released as carbon dioxide molecule as the reactions in Tca cycle is going on. So the oxidation of acetyl CoA as it is going on, so there will be a release of carbons, 2 carbons present in acetyl CoA as carbon dioxide. Now when this oxidation is going on, so as I already told you, so the electrons, because the oxidation is basically release of electrons there. So electrons are released again. Electrons are there in the form of NADH plus H plus, or it can be FADH2, NADH or FADH2. Not only electrons are released here, so it is also like as the metabolic pathway is running, so there will be release of heat also. Now remember, when the catabolism is going on, when something is oxidized, so not entirely 100% of electron energy present in the electron is there in the form of NADH plus H plus or FADH2, it is also released as heat. I'm going to explain you what actually the use of this heat there. Let me finish explaining like what happens to these electrons, like in the flow of electrons. There is energy present in the electron. How our body is going to use that energy, what it's going to do with that energy and all that. So energy present in the electrons, so it is basically this NADH and FADH2, they get into something called as electron transport chain, which is located in the inner mitochondrial membrane. So there are 4 complexes in the electron transport chain, which are simply written as complex 1, complex 2, complex 3 and complex 4. Generally the NADH plus H plus, it enters into complex 1, and FADH2, it enters into complex 2 in the electron transport chain. So the electrons are moving from one complex to another complex. So as the electron is moving from one complex to another complex, from complex 1 to complex 4, so there is energy that is lost here in this process, because these complexes are arranged in the decreasing redox potentials, from negative redox potential into the positive redox potential. They are arranged as from negative redox potential to positive redox potential. As the electrons are moving from higher negative redox potential to towards the positive redox potential, there will be release of energy, and that energy is used to pump protons from the intermembrane space, from the matrix side into the intermembrane space. So there are 3 complexes that has got an ability to pump protons, and that is complex 1, complex 3 and complex 4. So, these 3 complexes, they will pump protons from the matrix into the intermembrane space. So, that means that they are going to create a proton gradient in the intermembrane space. As the sufficient proton gradient is created, so the protons will start to return from the intermembrane space back into the matrix through another complex called ATP synthase complex. So, there is a complex which is sometimes referred as fifth complex in the electron transport chain, which is basically ATP synthase. And this ATP synthase, as the protons are returning back from the intermembrane space into the matrix through ATP synthase. So, what ATP synthase does is, ATP synthase, it is going to phosphorylate ADP with the Pi, inorganic phosphate, to make ATP. So, adenosine triphosphate is synthesized. There is a phosphorylation is going on here. So, this is phosphorylation going on, and this is oxidation process, oxidation of NADH plus H plus into NAD plus, or FADH2 into FAD plus. So, oxidation is going on in the electron transport chain, and that is coupled with phosphorylation process here. Phosphorylation, oxidation, as the oxidation is going on, there is phosphorylation of ADP with Pi to make ATP. That is why sometimes we refer this electron transport chain process as a coupled process, like oxidative phosphorylation. Oxidative phosphorylation is another name for electron transport chain. That is why it is called oxidative phosphorylation. What else happen in this particular reaction? So, in order for oxidative phosphorylation to go on, so there is a need for oxygen molecule in the fifth complex. So, the fifth complex, sorry, not fifth complex, like the fourth complex needs a molecular oxygen, and that molecular oxygen is going to combine with the water molecule, means it is going to combine with the protons to make water molecule. So, this is how oxygen is used there to produce ATPs. So, electron transport chain is going to make ATP by oxidative phosphorylation process through ATP synthase. It needs oxygen to, that is the final complex in the electron transport chain, need oxygen. Oxygen is released as water molecule, because it is going to combine that with the protons to make water. So, that means oxygen. How do you get oxygen? Oxygen, we get it from respiratory process, like respiration, inhalation. So, inhalation. So, respiration is directly connected with the electron transport chain. That is why the electron transport chain is also referred as respiratory chain. So, there are two other names for electron transport chain, ETC. So, the electron transport chain is called as oxidative phosphorylation. Oxidative phosphorylation, because oxidation of dietary fuels are coupled with the phosphorylation to make ATPs. So, the fuels oxidation will be used to make ATP. That is why it is called as oxidative phosphorylation. Other name is respiratory chain. So, why it is called as respiratory chain? And that is because oxygen is used in the electron transport chain to make ATP. So, oxygen with the H2 molecule. So, basically you are going to let's write, I will write it as H2, 2H2. So, you get 2 water molecule H2O. So, respiratory chain. These are the other names for electron transport chain here. Now, let me come back to the point where I told you that I will explain what is the use of this heat. So, the heat that is generated in every metabolic, basically the catabolic process, where there is a generation of heat. So, this heat is going to maintain our body temperature. It keeps it maintains the body temperature. So, maintenance of body temperature is important because we need to keep our enzymes active. So, it keeps enzymes active because we have 37 degrees centigrade as our body temperature. And how do we maintain 37 degrees centigrade? It is possible only because of the oxidation of fuels, which are basically releasing heat and also releasing electrons in the form of NADH plus H plus, which are eventually making ATPs, and these ATPs will be used for anabolic reactions or any other reactions wherever there is ATP is necessary. So, this is how our major fuels, dietary fuels like carbohydrates, fats, proteins are oxidized, and how these molecules, this is how the oxidized product of carbohydrates, fats and proteins are being used to generate ATPs and also to maintain body temperatures, which is basically the and this temperature is necessary to maintain our enzymes active. That's why whenever we are physically active, our metabolic pathways, basically the catabolism increases, and that means we are going to burn the fuels, dietary fuels, and thereby we generate energy. So when the energy generation ATP is going on, there is a generation of heat also. That's why when we are exercising, our body temperature increases, and that's because catabolism is going on, Tca cycle is running faster. Even the electron transport chain also releases heat. Electron transport chain not only produces ATP, around 60% of the energy is used to make ATP. Rest of the energy is basically released as heat, and that will contribute towards the maintenance of body temperature. So, this is all about dietary fuels. I hope you have understood these basic things that are going on in our cells, how our cells are going to oxidize the dietary fuels, and how these dietary fuels are the energy coming out of the dietary fuels are used to maintain our cellular needs. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't subscribed to this channel, so kindly consider subscription to this channel, and also click the bell icon so that you get regular notification in your inbox, so that you will be informed about like what kind of whenever a new video has been uploaded to my channel. Thanks again, and see you in my next video.